We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the reconciliation bill. Will it pass? Will they separate them? And then one or maybe none of those will pass. We don't know, but I am already seeing a lot of signs, and I'm sure many of you are already worried about the possibility that regardless of what happens, progressives are going to be blamed for it not being arbitrarily better. And I've seen that coming up in a lot of different forms. Some of it is explicit, blaming progressives for things. Others is in what is not said. And I have versions of both that I want to show you. So first of all, I found a few little sections from a recent New York Times article about the negotiations that I had a problem with for a number of different reasons. One had to do with the introduction of the billionaire tax. They said the need to roll out new tax proposals stems largely from the concerns of business groups. I'm glad that you identified that. And moderate Democrats hate that term. They've never had to justify it. I hate that they can just say that, and they do say they effectively killed Mr. Biden's initial plan to raise the corporate tax rate to pay for his clean energy and social policy initiatives. Other ideas proposed by the White House, including raising the top marginal tax rate for the wealthiest taxpayers and doubling the capital gains tax, have also been jettisoned. So that is hardly the worst that I've seen from the media. But again, anything specific to motivation, why exactly they killed it, allowing people to understand what is driving some of these incredibly powerful politicians has largely not been a focus unless that is the only thing that the article is about. So it is not that there hasn't been some coverage of the fact that, for instance, Joe Manchin owns a coal company. It's just that you get the article about him owning it, and that's that. For the most part, anything else having to do with him and environmental policy no longer references that. We'll identify that he has it, but we're not going to besmirch the good senator by implying that it might be influencing his decisions later on. And so I've got other examples I'm gonna give, but Brett, what are you thinking so far? I know that you've been out for 2 weeks, you haven't been following this every day.
I've been following it. This always seems to happen. Basically, I think my full take on it is you cannot understate or overstate, I forget the right way to say it, but like you're always gonna be wrong and play it too cool when you think of how lazy people in media are. They are so lazy. They know it already. They take new facts and they put it into their old, easy, tried and true framings. And even though a lot of them feel like they like this new progressive instinct in folks in like actual places of power who can wield it, they still at the end of it say things like that frustrate you, like moderate. Yeah. Like moderate is not moderate for the rest of the country. It is psychotically to the right. Most people want what's in the Build Back Better plan because of course they do. And you would hope that they would have to justify, I love that word, justify why they're saying no to these things and have to look into the faces of people that these last minute, these things that seem like they're at the last minute. I'm sorry, it just didn't make it into the bill, but maybe over the long run, they never thought they'd get into the bill. You'd think they'd have to look in the eyes of the people that affects and tell them exactly why it happened, but they don't. It just is one of those things they want you to come away from saying like, well, there was a compromise. And at the end of the day, compromise is good. Everyone's gonna feel kind of crappy. Yeah. But when they say they're compromising, who are they compromising with? It's fine if Joe Manchin owns a coal company in theory. Maybe it's fine for someone from West Virginia to have some kind of business interest that represents West Virginia. But if and only if his behavior as someone running that business actually translates to what's good for West Virginia now and in the future. But it doesn't. It always seems to just translate to what's best for Joe Manchin's bottom line and the bottom lines of his kids. Because the things that end up falling out of these plans are things that benefit literally his family. TYT has a new article up about how Joe Manchin is already making money off of this.
Yeah,
already.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And yeah, like in theory, some of this could represent, but like even with, let's say that he as a coal CEO could represent the coal industry, which I think that is incredibly questionable. Even if you assume that literally everyone who works in coal in the country works in West Virginia, which isn't true, it's just tens of thousands of people. West Virginia has 1.8 million people. It is such a tiny swath of their population. But anyway, I want to get to some more issues that I have with the media. So here is them talking about the tax once again. If enacted, the taxes would likely apply to fewer than 1,000 companies and individuals. That is a good thing to know. I'm glad that they did that. But the breakneck speed at which changes are being considered and crafted is rattling business groups and some powerful Democrats who have expressed concern about the consequences of moving so quickly. So it is not that what they're saying is untrue. They have expressed concerns about the consequences of moving so quickly, but that is not their principal concern. It's not that I'm worried that you're gonna tax us too fast. It's that they're worried they will be taxed at all.
They were untaxed wildly fast.
Yeah, exactly. This is making it a process thing, a procedure thing. It's not, it's an economic thing. It's a class thing. The powerful Democrats aren't like, well, I'm totally cool with like regulating the hell out of these companies. I just want to take a couple weeks. That's not true at all. That is not what is happening. And so people reading this will come away thinking, well, they seem reasonable. I mean, after all, they just want to pump the brakes a little bit. No, they want to kill it because they never want them to be taxed, literally at all.
But yeah, so it is always going to be the case that the people running these companies don't want to pay higher taxes. And they will always present their argument as though it threatens the life of their company. And then they'll say our employees. Meanwhile, their success, those CEOs personally did not rise commensurately with that of their employees. And anytime, and this is their move, that's psychotic. The central theme of their narrative for America is this entrepreneurial spirit will triumph no matter what. And they're trying to convince you that that entrepreneurial spirit that they're so proud of will disappear the minute the tax rate goes back to less than it was before their last tax cut. And that's insane. They will always, to their credit, and that's how I frame it to them when I talk to them. No, to your credit, you're such a great entrepreneur that we will be able to have roads and bridges and programs that every other country that people live longer in have, and you'll still be successful. And you'll be able to use that entrepreneurial spirit to overcome the challenge of a fair tax rate.
Yeah, 100%. Well, a broader blamey thing. So this is not identifying what's really going on, but then there's just outright blaming the progressives. So Stephen Collinson on CNN says, and will what is now a much diminished measure so disappoint Democratic base voters and independents that it will fail to have the significant political impact the party needs to stave off a Republican rout in next fall's midterm elections? One thing is for sure, if progressives don't eventually come around, even if they are dissatisfied with the compromises made to get the package through the Senate, they could inflict huge damage on Biden's already wobbling presidency. Okay, in some sense they'd be doing that, but they're the ones on Biden's side. That's like saying, okay, I understand that I buried 3 daggers in your back and you're currently face down on the pavement, but if you don't get up and finish that marathon, you've hurt your time. Well, kind of, but the daggers are an important part of this, and I feel like they should really be more of a focus of this marathon commentary.
They're right. I mean, he's right, but it's sad and it's nefarious. Well, in that giant pukograph of like sad framing, it is true that if the progressives are like say, actually, hey, everyone in our voting block, that we got great stuff out of this. And if they're able to convince people that we got great stuff out of this, that will help Biden's already wobbling presidency. The downside is that that's a lie. They'd have to lie to everyone. And you have the more savvy, more interested voters in those blocks, the people who are reading news about this very stuff every single day, 700 times a day. And while you can get that narrative across the finish line with moderates who are like, I don't know, I guess whatever, I just want people to get along in Washington, you can't sell that to people. And that's why I mean, from what I've been following, there's been a lot of pushback. I mean, they say that Jayapal kicked Nancy Pelosi out of the meeting and she walked away without any words to say. Is that gonna follow through to votes that are no's? Maybe, and we'll see about that. But that's the one I just put out, I think, is the decision that's facing a lot of progressive legislatures. The legislators who are kind of looking around to see whether they need to put air quotes around the word progressive.
Yeah. And look, it's like if they pass what and God only knows what's actually in the bill. They change every 5 minutes. But if they do, they will have some things that they can go back and say, we got this stuff. But they probably also know in the back of their mind, it is, as for all of the other problems with this section, also true that it probably will not be enough to actually do something. It could have been, and by the way, someone noted they're on Biden's original side, not the side that he's on now, which is true. That's what I mean. They were pushing for the actual things that he promised. And by the way, the things that would in theory be necessary for them to win the midterms. If they passed the original bill that had been talked about, that we know was wildly popular, they would have a very good chance, I think. There's already issues with gerrymandering and voter suppression, and the inherent cycle of the Senate would be difficult for them. But they would have a chance. This is not providing them a chance. So not only were the progressives more true to the promises that were made in the last election cycle, they also had their eyes on what's necessary to win in the next one. And I just want people to note that and understand that going into it. Next year is going to be really, really rough. It is not going to be a surprise to people who've been watching this and a few other programs.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.